As Foreign Minister Yair Lapid met with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Rome, Israeli President Reuven Rivlin meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden on Monday at the White House, both conveying a message of a new era for U.S.-Israel relations under the new administrations, but also expressing concerns over the Iran nuclear deal. So here to discuss the significance of these visits and the current state of Israel-U.S. relations is Professor Meirowitz from SUNY Maritime College in New York. Welcome. So it seems the new Israeli coalition, as well as the U.S. administration, are really trying to convey the sense of a new era of friendship between the two countries, especially now that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is gone. Yet there are so many issues of contention, mainly Iran. I mean, is this really the new reality, a new era, or is this just, a honeymoon phase that will soon come to an end?
I don't see any rift at all. I don't think it's a new era at all. The relationship, if you listen to the takeaways, is absolutely solid. Of course, there are always going to be issues. There have always been issues in U.S.-Israeli relations. But the purpose of the trip by Lapid is to solidify essentially a number of points. Number one, we're the new coalition. We're also a fragile coalition, so you need to work with us to help us to remain in power. Secondly, please continue the Abraham Accords. We see that the United States supports that. And Lapid is coming to mend fences with the Democratic Party because of the close relationship between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Also, Iran obviously is on the table, and the issue of Israel and the Palestinians and Gaza are obviously there, and Blinken is interested in it. But the one thing that you actually didn't show in your clip, which is really important, is when Lapid said to Blinken that you're a son of a Holocaust survivor, and I know we can count on you. I think that, to me, is the most important takeaway. Lapid is not Kissinger. He's Antony Blinken, and he understands the significance of the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, and the significance of the survival of Israel in a very, very difficult region, particularly with Iran.
Now, Lapid also said yesterday in Rome that mistakes were made and will fix them. I mean, should he have acknowledged that in his first meeting? Do you think that was the right move, undermining the previous coalition?
Well, I mean, Israeli politics is Israeli politics. I mean, I don't know who was supposed to hear that. I think it was frank, and it was very, I think, candid. And I think the mending mission that he's on, he needs to be able to come straight in ahead to the Democrats, because that's why he's here. The key issue domestically is cementing the relationship with Democrats, because there's always been a strong relationship between the Democrats, Republicans, bipartisan with Israel. But we see that somewhat undermined now by this groups in the Democratic Party, AOC and the others, who are grandstanding against Israel. And so Lapid is coming to help cement that with the natural support of the Democratic Party. He's always been a supporter. So that, to me, is the key domestic takeaway. So I don't think it's a bad thing that he was candid. I think it's a good thing. I think people will appreciate that.
I mean, do you think that this new coalition will be able to mend this rift with the Democratic Party, especially given the climate that you mentioned within the party?
Well, look, President Biden is facing the same pressure on his issues from the progressive wing, on his infrastructure and all the things he's doing, as on the same issues on Israel and the Palestinians and Israel and the Middle East. It's the same thing. Biden, I believe, is a solid friend of Israel. And that's part of the Rivlin trip. See, the Rivlin trip, his last trip as president, he knows Biden. This is the personal relationship. We see from the summits that the personal relationship is very, very important to Biden. And sending President Rivlin is really, really important to mend that personal relationship, because Biden is a great friend of Israel, but he has pressure from the Democrats. So what Lapid is coming to do and Rivlin is coming to do are to help to make this, to push this back to where it was, which is much more bipartisan. And as I said before, this close symbiosis between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu tended to, to be very candid, alienate many Democrats. We went through a very fraught period. We're now with Biden. He wants predictability and stability, and part of that is working out a good relationship with Israel where there are no surprises and that diplomacy is conducted quietly and not out on the full stage, because that is something the Democrats did not like, particularly President Obama, when Prime Minister Netanyahu went to Congress and basically rallied and lobbied against the Iran deal. I mean, he was right to be against the Iran deal, but to do it in that fashion across the other side of Washington, D.C. was a real turnoff for the Democrats. So that vestige of that feeling, that needs to be repaired, and I think it can be repaired. There are many, many friends in the Democratic Party who love and admire Israel. There's no question about it. But we went off the derech, we went off the path, and we got to get back on the path again. I think we will. And I think this is a very smart move, sending these, the more seasoned president who knows everybody, and the new foreign minister. And I think his remarks and the way he handled himself was really quite adept.
All right, Professor Mark Meirowitz, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
A pleasure.